We need to write a program, and it inputs two strings from the user and checks if they are both the same. Our program needs to use recursion. We're going to write a recursive method called isSame to say same or not the same, depending on if the two strings are the same. So we need to write a program, inputs two strings from a user. So that means we're going to have to get the user input inside of here. What we're going to do is need a scanner for user input. So we're going to do scanner. We'll call it input, and we're going to set it equal to a new scanner. We were taking system.in. That did not work out correctly. It should be system.in. We're going to hover over scanner and then import just scanner. Now we need to actually ask the user for the two strings. So we're going to do a sysout, and then we are going to just type in input two strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a prompt in here where it says input two strings, and then we're going to have our first string. After we input two strings, we are going to do enter first string, press enter, then input the second string and press enter. And so that is how we're going to get both strings. After this, we can end this in a period. We're going to need to write in our first string, so we'll do a sysout.println. We could do these on the same line, but I'll just do it in a new line, where we're going to write in string 1. And I'll get rid of this print so that way the user input will be on the same line. And then in here I'm going to do, let's just say string s1 is going to store our first one, and we're going to set it equal to input dot next line. So we're going to take the whole line of user input. Now we're going to do the same thing, but for the second string. So we're going to change this to s2, and now we can run this and see if it works. So input two strings, first string, enter the first string, press enter, then input the second string and press enter. So string 1, we'll call it test. String 2, we'll call it testing. And then our program stops there because we have nothing else left. Well, we know that per the instructions, we need to write a recursive method. So the next thing that we're going to do is call our method while passing in those two strings. So we'll call it isSame. We're going to pass in our string 1 and also our string 2. We can hover over isSame. We're going to create the method. It's going to be a, well actually, it's going to be a, yeah, it'll be private because we're only using it in this class. It can be public, but that's just nitpicking. I'll just make it private though, since we're only using it in here. It's going to be type static because we aren't making an instance of it. We're just straight up calling it. It's going to be a void because it's not printing anything. We're just doing something inside of here called isSame, and then we have our string s1 and s2 inside of here. Now what we're going to do is we have to use recursion. That's what the instructions say. It says we need to use recursion and write a recursive method. So we know that we need a base case. So our base case we can do, how I'm going to look at this program is we're going to go through both strings, and we're going to take a little bit off of each string every single time after we compared them. Now, if what we take off is the same, we'll keep recursively going through this. If it's not the same, we're immediately just going to stop and we'll return it's not the same. So our base case is going to be if our string lengths are 0. So we'll say if our s1 dot length is equal to 0 and our s2 dot length is equal to 0, because remember they both have to be the same length. That's obvious. If they're the same string, they have to be the same length. And then we're going to print out sysout, and then print line is the same. Or I think the instruction just wants us to print isSame. So we will just print out isSame. That means they are the same. Otherwise, if the strings, if we are not at the end, we're going to have to go through our strings. So this is if we are at the very end, and now we're going to be in our else if case. And our else if case is if the two string lengths are equal, but we have to compare everything. So this again is just for the base case, if they equal 0. Now we're actually going to go and compare each of the characters. And we're going to do the .char at, and we're going to use substrings to break this apart. So we're going to say else if the s1.length is equal to s2.length, we are going to be inside of here, and that should be length. And then inside of here, we are going to write our recursion. Before we do that though, there is one other statement. It's going to be an else statement. And that's if our lengths aren't the same. We can see they're both the same here. They're both equal to 0. They literally both have to be the same here because we are assigning them to each other lengthwise. And so the only other case is if they're not 0. So we'll have else. If the lengths are not the same, we are just going to sys out not same per the instructions. And so that is the super bare bones of our code. Inside of our else if, we are again using recursion here. We are going to first be getting characters from strings. So first we're going to look at each individual character inside of here, so each individual letter, and we're going to compare each one every single time we recursively go through this. So first I'm going to store these in something. I'm going to do char because we're looking at characters, and I'm going to do letter 1, and I'll say that this is equal to s1 dot char at the index of 0. Now we want to look at the second letter, so I'm just going to call it letter 2, and set it equal to s2 dot char at index 0. And you might be asking yourself, well, if we're only looking at index 0 every single time, how are we going to look at all the other characters? Well, the answer to that is we are going to use substrings to go through these strings. We don't have to return these strings. If so, we would probably need to store them in some kind of variable and deal with that, returning the string itself and then returning if they're equal, but we are only returning if they're equal to. So now that I've said that, we can do it. So we are going to use an if statement to compare these two letters, right? Because even if they are the same length, it doesn't mean that they're the same thing. We need to compare these, and we need to see if the letters are the same. So we'll have an else if statement that does that. We'll say if our letter 1 is equal to our letter 2, we're going to be inside of here. Now, if our letters are not equal, we're going to fall into this else statement. And obviously that means we have to print out that it is not the same. So we're going to print out not same if they are not equal to each other. If they are equal to each other, we're going to have to look at the next character. So we're going to do is same, and then we're passing in the s1 dot substring. And there's a video on substrings somewhere in a playlist on the channel. But basically, we pass in a number, an integer, and that's the beginning index in our string. So we're going to do at index 1. And we're also going to pass in the index 1 of our second string. So we have two substrings that we're making in here where we pass in the first index and the first index here. And then as we go through this, every single time we go through this recursion, we're going to be kind of eating away at our original string. So let's say we start off with test, right? Well, and then we are also starting off with testing, right? So this is the string 1 and this is string 2. Well, we go through this, we say that, okay, the lengths aren't the same. So we'll change this to test, right? Well, we're going to say, okay, they're the same length, so we're going to be in this else if statement. Now, we're going to get the first characters. Letter 1, letter 2, we're going to get character at 0, character index 1. So character here and character here, right? And now we're going to compare them. If letter 1 is equal to letter 2, we're going to be in here. And then we're going to make a substring, and we're going to pass it in. And this substring starts at index 1. So this is index 0, and this is index 1. That means our substring will only have these characters. So we're going to take off the T here. And then we're going to do the same thing for the next recursion where we take off the E, and then the S's are the same, so we're going to be in here, take off the S's, and then we'll take these off as well. Once we do that, we have nothing left, but we've gone through this if statement every time, so we've gone through the recursion every single time, so our length for both is now 0. and we will print out that it is the same. So let's try it out. Let's see if it works. I'm going to run it. We're going to input the string 1. I'll do test. String 2 is also test. It is the same. Now let's try running it test and also test. We can see that they're not the same. We could make it the same if we did in the input right here, like .ignore casing, but we're not considering casing here. And if there is casing, it's not the same. And so that's the basic of this code. This is if they're not the same. Running it again, I'll just write out Tesla, Tesla again. We can see that it is the same. So Tesla has proven that our code works. Our method is good. We have followed the instructions that were given to us, and we have completed this program.